one comes across a special rooftop that is truly remarkable. It features an extraordinary garden, a garden with a unique personality. Nestled 100 feet above the noise and traffic of Kensington High Street, one of London's major shopping districts, is a charming garden treasure simply called the Roof Gardens. While London is known for grand formal gardens, this informal elevated oasis is a refreshing refuge. Situated well over the crowds, the Roof Gardens was the largest of its kind in the world when it was created in the 1930s, atop Darien Tom's department store. Since that time, it has remained relatively unchanged.
I don't know, it's just totally amazing because it's like on top of a building, but it seems quite a big garden. It's just really weird feeling to then just be straight down into London with the taxis, so it's really nice. I'm going to come here again.
An impressive 1.5 acres in size, the Roof Gardens is actually comprised of 3 theme gardens: a Tudor, a woodland, and a Spanish garden.
The garden we're sitting in at the moment is the Spanish garden. We just try and keep the theme that you would find in a more Mediterranean sort of area. Palm trees, manicured lawns.
This roof garden also features cool reflecting pools and bubbling court fountains. And on the cobblestone court, one can make a wish at the wishing well. The Spanish bell tower, cloaked in a lush tangle of wisteria, catches the rooftop breezes that give one the feeling that they just might be in the Mediterranean. Next to the tower, a delightful Moorish pergola with its red tile roof, Spanish medallions, and fanciful twisted columns usher visitors into the cobblestone courtyard beyond. Outside the courtyard, sunny whitewashed walls with hand-painted ceramic tiles frame the octagonal ponds, while classical marble statues invite guests to stroll down their lofty lanes. While a mysterious Contessa watches from her wrought iron balcony.
The Tudor garden is a garden with mostly climbing things, wisterias.
The garden is literally overflowing with the fragrant flowering vine. The wisteria's cascading clusters form the perfect backdrop for the Tudor garden's central stone fountain, colorful container plants, and traditional herringbone brick walkway. This brick path leads to a meticulously clipped topiary creation. The third garden is an enchanting English woodland garden with native trees and plants indigenous to the English countryside.
We've got ferns and camellias and rhododendrons and sorts of plants you would generally find on the ground in a woodland garden.
Abundant ivy spills onto the stone walkways of this city sanctuary, leading visitors to a stream where 100 feet above London city streets, pink flamingos, gold koi, and pintail ducks frolic, unaware of their lofty habitat or the hard work of the garden staff.
The biggest challenge and hardest task is keeping it watered in the summer months because the wind combined with the heat and no automatic irrigation makes it very hard work. The whole garden's built slightly concave and it just drains naturally through the paving, through the soil, to the clinker which is on the bottom, and then there's an asphalt roof on the very base.
Constant watering, as well as keeping the manicured lawns trim and tidy, is all part of the job. A job well appreciated by visitors needing a break from the busy streets below.
It's an oasis. It was a real surprise. I had read about it and read the description of it. Apparently there's 3 feet of dirt here on the top of the roof, and but it's very beautiful. It was still a surprise when we came up out of the elevators.
It's charming. It's exactly the kind of thing you wouldn't expect right in the middle of London. You wouldn't find anything like this in the U.S. Maybe you would, but we don't know about it.
When we return, we'll explore one of Australia's most magical and enchanting gardens. Plus, we'll tell you the story behind these intriguing and whimsical creations. The next stop on our World Garden Tour is Australia, where the gardens are as surprising as they are diverse, from glorious English settings to exquisite Asian landscapes to tropical rainforest gardens. This diversity, due to the varied climates in Australia, is responsible for the spectacular beauty of its natural wonders, native plants, and magnificent trees. Our tour takes us to the eastern coastal city of Melbourne, which is often considered to be the most British-influenced city in Australia. Melbourne's splendid formal gardens, sculptured greenery, and colorful flower beds reflect its British heritage.
It's often said that Melbourne is an area of, I suppose, a genteel type of people, as opposed to some of the other parts of Australia.
The city of Melbourne is the capital of the Garden State of Victoria. In fact, about 1/3 of Melbourne, approximately 2,000 acres, is made up of parkland. Melbourne is known for its gentle climate, which promotes the growth of many types of plants.
One of the key things is being close to Port Phillip Bay. It has that influence of moderating the temperatures. So we can, in Melbourne, grow almost any type of plant. In fact, many of the plants in the gardens here are native to Queensland, which is some 3,000 miles north. And that's a very big distance in terms of climatic change. So we can grow palm trees, we can grow bananas, all those sorts of things, and yet we can grow plants that are used to very cold climates.
Thousands of magnificent specimens from Europe line the pristine parks and streets of Melbourne, and majestic century-old Dutch elms form a rich canopy across the romantic wide walkways. This noble elm was planted over a century ago by one of the city's first garden curators. Striking displays of Australia's plants and trees, such as this native eucalyptus, are what make a visit to Melbourne so special. And in the heart of Melbourne is one of the land down under's most enchanting parks, the Fitzroy Gardens.
Fitzroy Gardens are probably Melbourne's most famous gardens. They started back in the 1850s, and that was at a time when Melbourne was really in the gold rush fever time, and many people were coming to Australia. It was a very wealthy town at that time, and Charles La Trobe was the governor, and he decided that surrounding Melbourne ought to be a ring of parks. He was very keen on green and very keen to make sure that there were lots of open spaces.
The ring of parks form a green oasis within this busy city. Wide walkways lined with dazzling floral beddings invite visitors and residents to stroll along its pristine avenues. The Follies, an intriguing collection of whimsical buildings and statues, is what makes Fitzroy Gardens such a crowd pleaser. Cook's Cottage is among this collection of follies. It was originally built in 1755 in Yorkshire, England, and was the boyhood home of Captain James Cook, the navigator who first explored Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, and Tahiti. What's so remarkable about this ivy-covered cottage is that it was shipped brick by brick from England in 1933 and was reassembled here at Fitzroy Gardens.
Being the oldest building and also being James Cook's original residence, it has a lot of significance for Australia generally. It's a very important little cottage. It even has the original ivy vine that was growing on the cottage back in 1755. Cuttings were taken of that, brought to Australia and replanted, and you will see that that original ivy vine is growing over the cottage now.
After each of Captain Cook's long voyages, he came home to the pleasures of this charming cottage. There's even a delightful kitchen garden out back. The neat beds of herbs and flowers echo the lifestyle and beauty of rural England in the mid-1700s. Also behind the cottage is a crystal clear stream, which adds to the beauty and ambience of the garden. In 1933, the same year Cook's Cottage was reassembled, this Spanish-styled conservatory was constructed. It soon became another major attraction at Fitzroy Gardens. Tourists and residents alike delight in the spectacular floral displays inside this spacious building. There are hundreds of stunning specimens of quality gloxinias and hardy begonias, which dazzle the senses. Like a massive bouquet, the fragrance of these brilliantly colored plants permeates the air. The conservatory's stunning specimens are carefully cultivated to produce an exceptional plant. Perhaps one of the most enchanting follies in the garden is the fairies tree. This work of mythical artistry was carved from a 500-year-old river red gum tree stump by Olga Kahn in 1933. This magical creation stands for one woman's love of children and these Fitzroy Gardens.
A lady in East Melbourne, which is around about 200 or 300 metres from where we are now, decided that she would like to carve something for the children. So she's carved little figures of fairies and goblins and kangaroos and koalas and kookaburras and all those sorts of things.
Another favorite of the children, and apparently the birds too, is the model Tudor village. This colorful folly, with its tiny scale church and thatched roof cottages, even boasts a miniature replica of William Shakespeare's home. The village was a gift from the people of Lambeth, England, to the people of Melbourne for food sent during World War II. In a quiet courtyard amid stately green plantings is the John F. Kennedy Memorial. Built in the 1960s, the memorial is a beautiful tribute to the American president's contribution to world peace. Nearby, one can view a classical rotunda. This fitting neighbor to the Kennedy Memorial is a stately structure that blends harmoniously into Fitzroy's classically English garden. Touring the expanse of woods and lawn, one senses the grandeur and flow of Fitzroy Gardens and its enchanted ring of parks. Its stateliness and charm reflect Melbourne's British influence, its natural beauty, and its history.
I would like people's memory of the gardens to be one of fine quality horticulture, of a great asset with great historic value, and something which links back to the very early settlement days, so that when people first came to this site and set up a village back in 1835, that whole horticultural development, that whole concept of fine quality gardening has carried all the way through.
When World Garden Tour continues, we'll take you to a Swedish storybook village where tiny country cottage gardens offer city workers a botanical paradise.
Get great at
Our World Garden Tour continues now with a visit to the idyllic Swedish countryside, where just outside Stockholm, there's a picturesque Swedish village. This storybook town, called Skansen, was the first open-air museum in the world when it was founded in 1891. Over the years, colorful manor houses, birch bark roof farmsteads, and charming garden cottages were constructed to show how many people lived and worked in the past in Sweden.
The beginning of this century, Sweden, as many other countries, were undergoing a quick industrialization. Workers were living in hard conditions. And then the idea came, actually from Germany, to give, or rather to rent to the workers, small allotments for them to grow vegetables.
To Swedish workers and their families, these little country cottages, built for them in the 1920s, was a dream come true. Every weekend they could escape the crowded city, forget about harsh working conditions, grow their own vegetables, and enjoy being out in the fresh air.
In these days, people did not have any refrigerator or no other ways really to preserve than to grow themselves, and they had potatoes which can stay fresh for a long time during winter. They had rhubarb, they had beans, they had onions, they had cabbages, everything that would keep for a long, long time. They brought back into the cities, into the cellars, the dark, kept them dark and had them all through winter.
The cottage vegetable gardens are still lovingly maintained by the staff at Skansen. There are healthy rows of peas and potatoes, onions and salad greens, and each year they yield a bountiful crop.
Here are some carrots, and we'll see if they are fresh. I don't know. They seem very small at the moment, and I don't know if we can ever find someone which is big enough. Well, here is at least one to start with, but they will grow long like this and stay for a long time during winter.
By the 1940s, Sweden was enjoying a measure of prosperity. Working conditions changed for the better, and these allotment huts continue to provide country sanctuaries.
The weekend house, though, changed a little bit. It was no longer the little red cottage that was the ideal. It was more of a suburban family house they wanted to have, and it was painted in yellow, and it looks more like a little villa. They did want to keep their old gardens. They want still to have vegetables. That's the heart of a garden, but there is more of a pleasure garden.
In the 1940s, Swedish families began planting colorful flowers like cosmos and calendulus, in addition to their vegetables. An abundance of lovely blooms, native to the Swedish countryside, now grace the dainty cottage gardens. And when it was time to return to the city, families carried with them fragrant bouquets of flowers cut from their gardens. What's it like inside these tiny garden cottages? We'll take you inside when World Garden Tour returns, and we'll also show you some Swedish countryside flowers that could thrive in your own garden. As our World Garden Tour continues in Sweden, let's now take a closer look at the enchanting garden cottages of Skansen in the Swedish countryside. They are a delight to the eye and remarkably compact. If the outside of the cottage appears small to you, the inside, a mere 6.5 by 10-foot space, will certainly seem even smaller. This petite cottage of the 1920s is a true efficiency.
There's a small sofa, place for about 2 or 3 persons, a small table, some chairs and a stove, and a small tiny kitchen for preparing food.
The kitchen is really a pantry area where pots and pans are tucked tightly away in cubby holes. The interior of this 1940s cottage is also very small. While the furnishings here are different than those found in a 1920s cottage, this cottage had everything the Swedish family required.
It's more modern. They don't have a stove of the old kind. They have a little gas stove. They have a little more modern equipment, but still it's very much the same idea.
There's also a tiny area with a table, which was used for preparing food, and there's a small washroom.
This is all so small we couldn't imagine to live like this today.
In the 1940s, Swedish families thought these cottages were wonderful, luxurious in fact, compared to how they lived in the city. And of course, the fresh air and fresh vegetables they enjoyed improved their health and their outlook on life. It's no wonder why cottage gardening is a concept that continues even today.
I myself have a small allotment park, big as this one, and it's a beautiful place where I grow my vegetable, my flowers, I meet with friends, and it's a weekend treat to go out there and relax, and it gives you sort of different flavor to life.
Some of the beautiful flowers found in these charming Swedish garden beds also do well in our gardens here in the United States. These calendulas are an annual that bloom all summer long. Their sunny petals open in the early morning and close at dusk. Few plants grow as rapidly as cosmos. Because of their height, these graceful flowers might work well in the back of your garden. They also produce long-lasting flowers, great for cutting. This cleome, or cat's whiskers, is an old-fashioned pass-along plant that grows throughout the U.S. Cleome likes any soil, will tolerate some shade, and prefers hot, dry locations. Another Swedish garden favorite is Aconitum, or monkshood, which likes moist, lightly shaded conditions. And for a tropical touch, hibiscus will grow as a perennial in southern gardens and as an exotic annual for those of you who live in northern climates. From the cottage gardens of Sweden to a rooftop garden above the streets of London to one of Australia's most enchanting parks, thanks for traveling with us. We hope you'll join us again